This is TWiT.
I think Mike Masnick's headline on techdirt.com kind of says it all. New York launches ridiculous, blatantly unconstitutional investigations, end quote, into Twitch and Discord, semicolon, deflecting blame from New York's own failings. We know that the shooter, I'm not going to, by the way, say his name, not going to give him any publicity, but we know that he opened a Discord chat room before the shooting. Anybody can do that. It's free. We have a Discord room. It couldn't be simpler to set up. Invited people in to discuss his plans. The police say it was as many as 15 people in there before he did anything. Those people knew what he was about to do. He then started up a Twitch stream, which only ran for a couple of minutes as he launched into his attack. Twitch pulled it down right away. I think I saw 40 people saw it on Twitch. But since then, 40 million people have seen it as it's been passed around. David, is Twitch or Discord to blame for any of this?
Well, I don't think any of us believe this, and this is why we're all kind of shocked at the attacks of Twitch and Discord for that. But it's interesting that 15 people in Discord heard what they were person was saying.
Did nothing.
Nothing. Now, but this goes to, and this is something we talk about on our shows about cybersecurity and about security awareness training is, there's this fear of, well, it's probably nothing. I don't want to cause a stir. I don't want to say anything. And there's a fear of that. But man, you need to say something when you see something like this. And it's not for you to deal with it. It's for authorities to deal with it. And we need everybody's eyes and ears to act as, monitors for these kinds of things. And, don't cast blame when you may not know something that's going on. But if someone is talking about some serious, violent, dangerous things on a social channel, alert an authority.
I have to say, the shooter was clearly radicalized into believe. He's only 18 years old into believing this BS replacement theory, which, frankly, Fox News has been flogging. Mm-hmm. But I don't see anybody. I don't see anybody investigating Fox News, nor do I think they should. The First Amendment protects that.
Yes.
I disagree.
Good.
I disagree. I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
No, please. Should Twitch, Discord, 4chan, and 8chan, they're also under investigation. Now that's the internet. They didn't say anything about investigating news media, probably realizing that they're going to, that's a potential problem with the First Amendment. But should they be held responsible?
So I'm not a constitutional scholar or lawyer. I made a last-minute decision not to go to law school. So I'm with those caveats being said, I did pretty well in the LSAT. But with those caveats being said, the First Amendment was written in 1791. And the point of it in 1791 was to require Congress to restrict speech and to restrict the press in promotion of the public good. So what's happened
to require Congress to prevent Congress?
It requires basically.
It says Congress shall make no law respecting, establish a religion or prohibiting free speech thereof, free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress. It's very simple. It says Congress shall make no law. By the way, we should point out that almost immediately after this, the Sedition Acts were passed, which did exactly that and was used to prosecute people like crazy. So the history of enforcement of the First Amendment is very checkered, to say the least.
No, again, I think the original intent of the founders, I wasn't there, so I don't have quantitative data on this, but it's my interpretation that the founders originally were just trying to make it so that the public good was what was preserved. And at the time, so again, this is like this is 1700, 1791. It was very expensive to create speech in written form and hand it out. So like, functioning newspapers were sort of just getting started, and it was very, very expensive. So free speech was meant to be not restricted in certain cases. But at that period of time when this was invented, there was no completely unfettered speech, and certainly there were no algorithms. I would ask the question, does a strict interpretation of the First Amendment, which is, it becomes one of these like super polarizing things, there's just no room for nuance. I would ask, in an age of algorithmic determinism and completely unfettered speech that's also unedited and can be taken out of context, does our strict interpretation of free speech make sense? And I don't think, I know that I'm in a minority here, but I actually don't think that it does. I'm not saying we go the direction of China.
So let's say we go down that direction, Amy. Let's say we go down the direction. Yeah. Then becomes the issue of who then decides. Who is the grand decider? And that becomes a big issue in itself. I should mention that we have more updated laws since the First Amendment. And I was feeling that Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act actually protects, groups like Discord and Twitch, which essentially, and I'm quoting here, no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. So essentially, they're not, and we've dealt, and this has come up many times, and this is just for any like hate speech or pornography or anything else that appears on some type of service, that they are protected for liability because someone else published something on their
and that's
service.
why what you're saying
totally
makes me nervous, because there have been a lot of people who've said, let's abandon Section 230. It's too broad.
Right.
And I disagree wholeheartedly, because without Section 230, there is no moderation. In fact, Mike Masnick at Protector points out Twitch might have been, by the new Texas social media law, prevented by that law from pulling down the stream. They would have to justify it and then could be sued over it by the new Texas law.
So again, I think the problem here is that we are thinking with too many constraints and parameters. Let's go back to the year 2000.
Yeah, let's just start from scratch and let's rewrite it. What would you say as a founding mother today that should be our constitutional right?
In the year, I want to address the problem. In the year 2000, I was at the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism. So great school if you want to be a journalist and pay a lot of money for the privilege of having a degree. I'm in the first ethics class, and I had just moved back to the United States from Japan. And it was like I had traveled back in time from the future because of the technology that we had here. And it was, not comparable in any way. So we spent an hour and a half looking at the Newsweek and Time magazine covers of O.J. Simpson. Some of you will remember that it was Time magazine that ran the unedited version. One of the magazines ran an unedited photo, his mugshot.
I remember
the other one darkened it. Okay, so this is everybody's favorite. It was the first day of ethics class. And the question that we were being asked was, should journalists be allowed to use digital cameras and digital editing software? Was that the right thing to do?
Here's the Time magazine cover. Here's the New York cover. Now, and you can see they darkened OJ in the Time cover.
Here's what I said. My response to that question was, why are we having this conversation? On my phone, which I realize doesn't exist yet in the United States, but this phone in the year 2000, I've got a camera in this phone. Pretty soon, literally everybody is going to be taking pictures with their phones, and we will be able to send things fast. And the question, should journalists be allowed to do this, is the wrong question. To me, that is, and I like, nobody wanted to have that. Nobody wanted to engage in that conversation.
Time's cover is protected, but Congress can't make a law saying you can't darken somebody's image on the cover of your magazine.
My point is, we're asking the wrong questions. It's not, should Section 230 be scrapped or rewritten? It's not, we have to approach these conversations with better questions and more nuance. And David, I don't have an answer to who gets to be the arbiter of what the new rules look like. What I'm actually in favor of is, in this particular case, an incremental approach that as technology changes, we should not be playing catch up. We should rather be creating policy and laws that are able to keep pace with the changes.
That actually makes sense. That's a very reasonable thing to say, and I agree with it.
Right, but historically,
It's hard to
trying
do.
Yeah.
It's hard to
policy
do.
and regulations keeping pace with technology does not have a good history,
Right.
at all. And so
Well,
what
it
happens
doesn't-
is,
Sorry.
go ahead.
No, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. You go ahead.
I'll just complete is what happens is organizations trying to protect their own brand develop their own sort of rules and regulations of what can and cannot be on the platform. And the hope is that they can do that. Look, Twitch, if someone's doing something horrific on their platform, there's only a certain amount of speed that you can catch it and stop it. I mean, the number of people who are monitoring it isn't infinite. So some stuff slips through for a period of time. And fortunately, Twitch was able to take this down. More my concern is we need to educate the populace of when you see scary dialogue going online, we don't want to get into a state where we're reporting on our neighbors, but there has to be a state of if someone's going to yell fire in a movie theater, we need to report that. There is a very clear line at that point.
Right. But so again, just to untangle a few things. First of all, from a technology point of view, there's absolutely a way to solve this problem. China is doing it every day through brute force and really smart machine learning.
But you did say you don't want
it.
it.
Possible.
You don't. I mean, China just passed a law that said you can only
right.
be upbeat and positive.
Right. I don't think that's the right way. But here's the issue. The challenge that we face in this country with just about everything is that there's a monetary incentive tied to everything.
It's a huge
so
problem.
the reason there is a reason that between 2010, 2011, 2014, over and over, I was at Twitter talking about some of these issues. And the problem is that if you make the bad parts of Twitter go away, that's partially what drives people to have those, it's what partially drives people there. So part of the challenge is that we've got the wrong incentive structure to try to compel these companies to fix things. There are parallels in artificial intelligence. We know that there are all kinds of huge transformer models that are very great, but have been trained on data or bad data. Sorry. So we know that these problems exist, but there's no incentive to fix any of it. In fact, it's going to be met with a penalty. There's a financial disincentive to fix these things. So what I would like to see is totally different legislation that doesn't focus on how are we going to define this particular act being shown on video at this particular moment in time, right? Because it's a moving target. It's always going to change. Is there a way that we can compel the platforms to promote, to attack what they know is bad stuff head on through incentives that are tied to revenue? I think it's the only, because nobody's going to come to the table and do this voluntarily. It's falling apart. The Supreme Court at Facebook is falling apart. We've got our own government agency where a disinformation board didn't work for, reasons that are tied to disinformation itself, which is tied to how the platforms make money.
But Amy, don't you think if there could be financial incentives attached to this, don't you think we would have seen this by now? Because, I like conceptually what you're saying, but I don't understand I can't even grok how the heck that would happen.
Yeah. So again, we just haven't done it before. So there is a carrot and stick model that can be accomplished through all kinds of things that are going to be wildly unpopular. But we know work, right? Tax incentives. There are lots of ways to achieve this if companies can commit to measure and enforce making sure that content is in the sort of is being generated for the public good. And I know that this immediately, the easier thing to argue about and have a conversation about is censorship. The harder thing to do is to solution it, right? To get to a solution that involves a different type of incentive structure.
Is it going to come from government? Is that where it's going to come from? It's not going to come from the companies because they're. I
don't think so. The companies are going to fight that, and they're going to have. Right.
You've really raised a larger issue, though. Larry Lessig, the great Larry Lessig, who was for a long time a strong advocate for eliminating copy protection and changing copyright law, finally gave up and realized I can't do this because of the perverse financial incentives and the money in Congress. He said, we can't do anything until we get money out of politics. And that became his cause. By the way, he's still working on that. But I don't think
he's still working on that.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to ever happen. So I understand if you could say, well, if there were no perverse financial incentives, we might be able to come up with a framework. But that's like saying, you know, if the moon were made of cotton candy, we could all live on Mars. I mean, it doesn't.
It's just different. It's just different. It requires reperception. Reperception is the art of taking the data that surround you at any given moment and looking for the white spaces.
And this is what you're so good at. Getting people out of the box. This is what you do.
You know, all we have to do is spend a little time, not us right now, but like a huge group of people should just spend some time batting this different idea around. And if you get to the end and decide this is not going to work, fine. But the problem is that we're not even thinking about
it. We're not even going.
No. And I feel like I know a lot of the people who listen to the show are the ones who have those great ideas. And sometimes you bring those ideas up at work or you're afraid to because you don't want to be ostracized. And like, because it's different equals bad, right? Different should equal curiosity. Let's exercise our curiosity and see where we get. And at the end, we get to a bad place, fine. We're going to be in no worse situation than we are today.